I didn't think my marriage was perfect, far from it, but I thought it was strong enough to survive anything. You know, the usual ups and downs. We had our fights, sure. I worked long hours at the shop, trying to keep the business afloat, and she'd get on my case about never being home. I'd snap back about her spending habits, or how she was always on her damn phone. But that's marriage, right? A little bit of tension, a little bit of love, and a lot of "we'll figure it out." At least that's what I told myself. Then one day, everything blew up. And when I say blew up, I mean it went to hell in ways I didn't think were even possible. It started with something small. That's how these things always go. You don't see the storm coming until you're in the middle of it, with no way out. I was doing laundry, yeah, laugh it up, but she'd been complaining about the pile for weeks, and I was trying to be a decent husband for once. Anyway, I was emptying her jeans pocket when I found it. A receipt from a hotel? At first, I didn't think much of it. She could have gone there for a work meeting, maybe grab lunch with a client. But then I noticed the date. It was from 2 days ago, when she told me she was getting her nails done with the girls. My stomach dropped. I should have confronted her right then and there, but something in me said, wait, make sure you're not jumping to conclusions. So I shoved the receipt back in her pocket and acted normal. Well, as normal as a guy with a boulder sitting on his chest can act. Over the next few days, I started paying attention, watching her. Her phone was glued to her hand, even more than usual. She'd giggle at texts and tell me they were from her sister. She started dressing up more, even for mundane errands like grocery shopping. And then, there was the smell of cologne on her. Not mine. I don't wear that cheap, spicy crap. By the time Friday rolled around, I was on edge. I could barely look at her without feeling like I was going to explode. So when she said she had another girls' night, I decided I wasn't going to sit at home like a chump. I followed her. It was almost too easy. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I watched her pull into the parking lot of that same hotel from the receipt, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight I thought it might snap. She walked inside like she didn't have a care in the world, her little overnight bag slung over her shoulder. I gave her about 20 minutes. Long enough to get comfortable, I figured. Then I marched inside. The woman at the front desk tried to stop me, but I was a man on a mission. I didn't need to ask where she was. I could feel it. Floor 3, room 312. When I kicked open the door, yeah, I didn't knock. There they were. My wife and some loser who looked like he sold used cars for a living, both scrambling to cover themselves. She screamed. He froze. And me? I laughed. I laughed like a damn maniac, because what else are you supposed to do when your life falls apart right in front of your eyes? You having fun? I asked, my voice dripping with venom. She started crying, saying it wasn't what it looked like, which was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Not what it looked like. They were naked, on a bed, in a hotel. It looked exactly like what it was. I didn't stick around to hear her excuses. I took out my phone, snapped a few pictures. I wasn't going to let her weasel her way out of this later, and walked out. The guy tried to get in my face, but one look from me, and he backed down like the coward he was. When I got home, I threw her stuff into a suitcase and left it by the front door. I didn't want her anywhere near me. Not that night, not ever. She came home hours later, makeup smeared, her eyes red and puffy. She begged me to talk to her, to let her explain. But I didn't care. Whatever she had to say didn't matter. She'd already said everything she needed to with her actions. Then she said something that stopped me in my tracks. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. And that's when things went from bad to worse. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. I froze, one hand on the doorknob, ready to walk out. For a second, I thought she was bluffing, just trying to manipulate me into staying. But when I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw it. The desperation, the panic. Her face was blotchy from crying. her whole body trembling like she was barely holding herself together. But I was still angry. Furious, actually. Who says something like that after what she did? You think that's gonna make me forget what you've done? I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. You want to play the victim now? After you wrecked everything? She just sobbed harder. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Like it was some kind of magic spell that could erase the image of her and that guy in the hotel room. I wanted to leave. God, I wanted to leave. But the thought of her doing something stupid, of me walking out and coming back to find her, gone, it stopped me. I couldn't be responsible for that, no matter how much I hated her in that moment. So I stayed. I sat down on the couch, as far from her as I could get, and told her to talk, to explain, to tell me how the hell we ended up here. It all came spilling out. She said she didn't know why she did it, that it wasn't about me, that she felt lost and unseen in our marriage. She blamed herself, then blamed me, then blamed life, circling around in this whirlwind of excuses and self-loathing. And every word out of her mouth felt like another knife in my chest. You were always working, she said. I felt alone. Yeah. I shot back. So screwing some random guy fixes that? What kind of logic is that, huh? She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did, but I was too angry to hear it. By the time she finished, it was late, past midnight. She looked drained, like the life had been sucked out of her. I told her we were done, that there was no fixing this. I wasn't interested in counseling or forgiveness or whatever pipe dream she had in her head about moving forward. She crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. That's when she lost it. She started pacing, pulling at her hair, crying so hard she could barely breathe. You can't leave me, she kept saying. I'll die without you. I'll die. I'll die. I didn't think she meant it. Not really. People say dramatic things when they're scared or desperate. But then she ran into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. I jumped up so fast I almost tripped over the coffee table. What the hell are you doing? I shouted, my voice cracking. She held it up to her wrist, her hand shaking so bad the blade was practically dancing in the air. I can't live without you, she sobbed. If you leave, I have nothing. Nothing. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I didn't know what to do, how to talk her down. I was still so angry, so hurt, but none of that mattered in that moment. All I could think was, she's going to do it. Right here, right now. Put it down, I said, my voice softer now. Please, put it down. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You don't love me anymore. You hate me. I don't hate you, I lied. This isn't the way. Okay, we'll figure this out. Just put the knife down. I don't know if it was my tone, or if she was just too exhausted to go through with it, but she finally dropped the knife. It clattered to the floor, and she collapsed next to it, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. I stood there, frozen, watching her. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part of me, the bigger part, just felt empty, like all the love I'd ever had for her had been drained out, leaving nothing but this cold, hollow space. That night, I slept in the guest room with the door locked. I didn't trust her, and honestly, I didn't trust myself. The next morning, she was still a mess, but calmer. She begged me not to leave, promised she'd go to therapy, do whatever it took to fix things. But I'd already made up my mind. I told her she needed help, real help, and that I wasn't the person who could give it to her. When I left the house that day, her screams followed me out the door. But I wasn't going back. Not after everything. Or at least, that's what I thought. Until she showed up at my job a week later, with a whole new plan to get me back. When she showed up at my job, I was in the middle of replacing brake pads on a customer's car. The guys in the shop all froze when she walked in. I mean, you don't expect your wife, your ex-wife in the making, To stroll into your workplace like she owns the place, especially not after the kind of nuclear fallout we just had. She looked different, almost eerily calm. Her makeup was perfect, her hair was done, and she was wearing that sundress she always knew I liked. It felt wrong, like a mask she'd put on to try to cover up the mess beneath it. "Can we talk?" she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I wiped my hands on a rag, my blood pressure already spiking. "This isn't the time or place," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Please," she insisted, her voice breaking just enough to tug at my coworker's sympathy. One of the guys even shot me a look, like, "Come on, man, don't be a dick." They didn't know the whole story, of course. Reluctantly, I nodded toward the office. "5 minutes," I said, walking past her. I didn't trust myself to look her in the eye. Once we were in the office, I shut the door and leaned against the desk, crossing my arms. "What do you want?" She sat down, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said, her voice quiet. "I'm working on myself. On us." "There is no us," I said flatly. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But I can't give up on us, okay? I can't." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "You already gave up on us. When you went to that hotel, when you lied to my face, you made your choice. Now I'm making mine." "I was stupid," she said, her voice cracking. "I was stupid and selfish and broken. But I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to fix me." "Good," I said, my tone colder than I meant it to be. "You should fix yourself. But you're not dragging me down with you." That's when she pulled out the big guns. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air like a bomb about to go off. I stared at her, my brain short-circuiting. "What did you just say?" I finally managed. She wiped at her eyes, her mascara smudging. "I found out last week. I wanted to tell you, but after everything that happened," she trailed off, looking at me like she was expecting me to swoop in and fix everything. I didn't know whether to believe her. My mind was racing, doing the math, trying to figure out if the timing even made sense. But then another thought hit me, one that made my stomach turn. "Is it mine?" I asked, my voice low. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Of course it's yours. How could you even ask me that?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "How could I ask? Are you serious? After what you've done, how the hell am I supposed to trust you on this?" "I'll take a test," she cried. "A paternity test, whatever you want. Just please, please don't walk away from me. From us." I stared at her, my chest tight. Was this real? Was she really pregnant? Or was this just another desperate attempt to keep me from leaving? And even if she was telling the truth, what the hell was I supposed to do now? "Get out," I said finally, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Get the test. Prove it's mine. Then maybe, I'll listen to you." She hesitated, like she was about to argue, but then she nodded and stood up. As she walked past me, she reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "Don't show up here again," I said. "This is my job. Don't bring your drama into it." She left without another word, and I sat down at my desk, feeling like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. For the next few days, I couldn't focus on anything. The guys at the shop kept asking if I was okay, but I just brushed them off. What was I supposed to say? My wife cheated on me, then threatened to kill herself, and now she's claiming she's pregnant with my kid? Yeah, that'd go over well. Then, a week later, she called. "I have the results," she said. "Can we meet?" I didn't want to. Every part of me wanted to hang up, to slam the door on her and whatever chaos she was about to bring into my life. But I needed answers. So I agreed. And what she showed me turned everything upside down again. When I met her, I chose a neutral spot, a coffee shop on the other side of town where nobody knew us. I didn't want anyone I knew walking in and seeing this circus unfold. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table by the window. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her hands and glancing around like she was afraid I wouldn't show. I sat down across from her, my arms crossed, and nodded at the envelope on the table. "That it?" I asked, keeping my tone sharp. She nodded, sliding it toward me. I didn't open it. I thought we should do it together. I snatched the envelope off the table, my jaw tight. I wasn't about to let her make this into some bonding moment. I tore it open, my hands shaking slightly, and pulled out the results. Positive. The baby was mine. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stared at the paper, my vision swimming. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. "See," she said softly. I wasn't lying. I looked up at her, my face blank. "And what the hell do you expect me to do with this, huh? Pretend like everything's fine? Play house with you after what you did?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I was too far gone for that. "I'm not asking for that," she said, her voice trembling. "I just want us to figure this out. For the baby." I leaned back in my chair, laughing bitterly. "You want to figure this out? You should have thought about that before you spread your legs for another man." She flinched, but I didn't hold back. "You made your bed, and now you want me to lie in it with you? I don't think so." "I made a mistake," she cried, her voice rising. "A horrible, stupid mistake, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But this baby doesn't deserve to pay for it." Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. As much as I hated her in that moment, she wasn't wrong. The baby didn't ask for any of this. It didn't ask to be born into a mess of lies and betrayal. But that didn't mean I could just forgive her. "I'll take care of the kid," I said finally, my voice cold. "I'll do what I have to do. But we're done. You and me? We're over." Her face crumpled, and for a second, I thought she might start wailing right there in the coffee shop. But she just nodded, wiping at her tears with shaky hands. "I'll do whatever you want," she said. "If you want to co-parent, we'll co-parent. If you want full custody, I'll sign the papers. I don't want to lose you completely." "You already lost me," I said, standing up. "You lost me the second you decided I wasn't enough for you." I left her sitting there, clutching that stupid envelope like it was the only thing holding her together. The next few weeks were a blur. She texted me a few times, mostly about the baby, doctor's appointments, ultrasound pictures, updates I didn't ask for but felt obligated to acknowledge. I was stuck in this weird limbo, torn between wanting nothing to do with her and knowing I couldn't just walk away from my child. Then, about a month later, she called me in a panic. "I think something's wrong," she said, her voice shaky. "The baby, I'm spotting. I'm scared." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her to call someone else, that it wasn't my problem. But instead, I grabbed my keys and drove to the hospital. When I got there, she was sitting in a wheelchair, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. I hated myself for feeling anything for her, but seeing her like that, so fragile and terrified, hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. "They're running tests," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what's happening." I sat down next to her, keeping my distance but staying close enough to let her know I wasn't going anywhere. It was the longest few hours of my life, waiting for the doctors to tell us if the baby was okay. Finally, they came in. The baby was fine, thank God, but they said she needed to take it easy, to avoid stress, to rest as much as possible. As we drove home, yes, I drove her home, because I'm apparently incapable of saying no, I felt this strange mix of relief and anger. Relief that my child was okay, and anger that I was still so tangled up in her mess. She looked over at me as we pulled into her driveway. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't thank me," I snapped. This doesn't change anything. I'm still not coming back. I know, she said, her voice barely audible, but it means a lot that you came. I didn't respond. I just sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel, wondering how the hell my life had come to this. I didn't know it then, but that hospital visit was just the beginning of a whole new chapter of chaos. Because as much as I wanted to stay out of her life, life had other plans. And the next curveball it threw my way? Let's just say it made everything that had happened so far look like a walk in the park. A few weeks after the hospital scare, things started to settle, or so I thought. She was quiet, keeping her distance, only reaching out when it was about the baby. It was almost like she'd accepted that we were done, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But then came the next curveball. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was at home working on my truck. I had some music playing, a cold beer in hand, and for the first time in a long time, I actually felt okay. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. We need to talk. It's important. I stared at the screen, debating whether to ignore it. I wasn't in the mood for another round of tears and apologies. But something about the way she worded it, short, serious, made me uneasy. What is it? I texted back. Her response came almost immediately. Not over the phone. Can you come over? I cursed under my breath, throwing my wrench down on the workbench. Part of me wanted to tell her to figure it out on her own, but the other part, the part that couldn't shake the thought of the baby, won out. Fine, I typed. Be there in 20. When I got to her place, she was waiting on the porch. She looked rough. Her hair was unwashed, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Whatever this was, it wasn't good. What's going on? I asked, staying at the bottom of the steps. She hesitated, biting her lip. Can we go inside? I don't want to do this out here. I sighed but followed her in. The house smelled like old coffee and stale air, and the living room was cluttered with baby books and clothes. It was a far cry from the woman who used to stress about having everything spotless. She sat down on the couch, wringing her hands. There's something I need to tell you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stayed standing, arms crossed. Then tell me. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and scared. He's been texting me. For a moment, I didn't understand. Who? The guy, she said, her voice trembling. The guy from the hotel? Every muscle in my body tensed. What the hell are you talking about? She swallowed hard, tears welling up in her eyes. He won't leave me alone. He's been texting me, calling me, showing up at my work. He says he's in love with me, that he wants to be a part of the baby's life. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. You're kidding me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I wish I was, she said, her voice breaking. I told him to stop, but he won't listen. He's obsessed. My blood was boiling. I could feel my hands clenching into fists at my sides. What do you want me to do about it? She looked at me, pleading. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. Okay? He's not just texting me. He's been saying crazy things. That he's going to take me away from you. That the baby should be his. I think he's been following me. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. This guy, the one she cheated on me with, was now stalking her, threatening her, and by extension, threatening my child? Have you called the cops? I asked, my voice sharp. She shook her head. What am I supposed to say? That I cheated on my husband with some guy, and now he won't leave me alone? They'll laugh me out of the station. Jesus Christ, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. This wasn't just her problem anymore. If this guy was unhinged, it could spill over into my life, into the baby's life. I thought maybe you could talk to him, she said quietly. I laughed bitterly. Talk to him? You think I'm going to have a nice little chat with the guy who wrecked my marriage and is now stalking you? You're out of your damn mind. Please, she begged. You're the only person I can trust. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, staring at her, wondering how the hell I'd gotten sucked this deep into her mess. Finally, I sighed. Give me his number. She hesitated, but then she grabbed her phone and handed it to me. I scrolled through the messages, my jaw tightening as I read the garbage this guy had been sending her. Then I called him. The line rang a few times before he picked up. Hello? His voice was smug, like he already knew who was calling. Listen to me, you piece of shit, I said, my voice low and steady. You're going to leave her alone. You're going to stop texting, stop calling, stop showing up. Because if you don't, I'll find you. And I promise you, you don't want that. He laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, the big tough husband, he said mockingly. Newsflash, buddy. She's not yours anymore. That was it. I saw red. You have no idea who you're messing with, I growled. Stay the hell away from her, or I'll make you regret it. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with rage. This isn't over, I told her, my voice cold. If he doesn't back off, I'm calling the cops. And if they won't handle it, I will. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. But as I left her house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. This guy wasn't going to go quietly, and I had a sinking feeling that things were about to get a hell of a lot worse. The call didn't solve anything. Deep down, I knew it wouldn't. Guys like him don't just crawl back under their rocks because someone tells them to. And sure enough, 2 days later, she called me again, her voice shaking so bad I could barely understand her. He's here, she whispered. He's outside. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the door, adrenaline pumping so hard I thought my chest might explode. I didn't even think about calling the cops. All I could think was, not today. Not on my watch. When I got to her house, I saw him right away. He was leaning against his car, arms crossed, smirking like he didn't have a care in the world. My blood boiled. This was the guy? This smug, scrawny little bastard was the one who'd blown up my life? He saw me pull up and straightened, his smirk widening, like he was happy to see me. I slammed the door of my truck and walked straight toward him. What the hell are you doing here? I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Relax, man, he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. I just wanted to see her. Make sure she's okay. Bullshit, I snapped. You've been stalking her, harassing her, threatening her. That ends now. He shrugged, like it was no big deal. Look, I care about her, okay? More than you ever did. She told me how miserable she was with you, how you ignored her, made her feel like nothing. That hit a nerve, but I didn't let it show. This isn't about me, I said, stepping closer. It's about you being a pathetic little creep who doesn't know when to quit. So let me spell it out for you. If you come near her again, if you so much as think about her, I'll bury you. His smirk faltered, but only for a second. You can't scare me, he said, trying to sound tough. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. Try me. For a moment, we just stood there, staring each other down. Then, finally, he got back in his car. But before he drove off, he rolled down the window and said, "This isn't over." I watched him go, my fists clenched so hard my knuckles turned white. Inside the house, she was sitting on the couch, clutching a pillow like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and glassy. "He's gone," I said, standing in the doorway. She nodded but didn't say anything. "Next time, call the cops," I added, my tone sharper than I intended. "This isn't a game." "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know who else to call. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "You need to get a restraining order," I said. Today. And if he comes back, you call the cops first. Then call me. She nodded, her hands shaking as she reached for her phone. I left after that, needing to put some distance between me and the chaos. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. That guy wasn't just some lovesick idiot. There was something off about him, something dangerous. And I was right. A week later, I woke up to a text from her. He broke in. I called her immediately, my heart racing. She answered on the first ring, her voice shaking. I locked myself in the bathroom, she said. He's in the house. I don't know what to do. Stay where you are, I said, already grabbing my keys. I'm on my way. I didn't even think about calling the cops. I just drove, breaking every speed limit on the way. When I got there, the front door was wide open. I grabbed the tire iron from my truck and stormed inside, my heart pounding like a drum. Hey! I shouted. Get out here, you coward. I heard a noise upstairs, a crash, followed by muffled shouting. Without thinking, I ran up the stairs, ready to swing the tire iron at anything that moved. He was in the bedroom, standing over her, his face twisted in rage. She was on the floor, her back against the wall, her hands raised like she was trying to shield herself. Get away from her. I roared, charging at him. He turned just in time to see the tire iron coming. I didn't hit him, though God knows I wanted to, but I swung it close enough to make him jump back. You've got 2 seconds to get out of here, I growled, my voice shaking with rage. Or I swear to God, I'll put you in the ground. He hesitated, his eyes darting between me and the tire iron. Then, finally, he backed off, muttering something under his breath as he shoved past me and ran out of the house. I dropped the tire iron and turned to her. She was sobbing, her whole body shaking, but she was okay. Bruised, terrified, but okay. The cops came after that. I stayed long enough to give my statement, to make sure she was safe. Then I left, knowing I couldn't be a part of her life anymore. Not like this. In the end, she got the restraining order. He got arrested a week later for violating it. And me? I got out. I stayed involved for the baby's sake, but I kept my distance. Because some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. And as much as it hurt, I knew this was one of them.